You are live.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome everybody to the Finance Committee meeting. We are here today to deal with several items, but before we do, Rachel, would you call the roll?
Yes. Good morning. Chair Balducci?
Here.
Regent Gray Kent?
Here.
Regent Ryan?
Here.
Regent Santiago?
Here.
Thank you so much. Chair Balducci, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And I see we have our ex officio member here, David Blitz, which I think is important to note. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the March 16th meeting. Is there a motion? David? So moved. David, you want to?
Just two small corrections. On page 2, I'm indicated as FAC vice chair, but actually in even years, the co-chairs for university is chair. And secondly, on page 3, where the minutes record quite accurately, I think, the discussion, I mentioned twice, Professor Blitz asked, followed by at the bottom, it's page 2 of the minutes, page 3 of the PDF, Regent Blitz, obviously not. So that either it should be changed to Professor Blitz or it's Regent somebody else. And I guess by checking the video, we can determine, because I frankly don't recall if I asked the third question or not.
Okay, now you complicated it a little bit because it should be a simple amendment, David. So why don't we do this? Why don't we clarify the first piece that you commented on, and the second and third, we'll just disregard the third question. So let's redo this again. So David, repeat what you want to clarify to make it simple. My edification.
Yeah. On page 2, change vice chair to chair, and on page 3 of the PDF, change Regent Blitz to Professor Blitz.
Got it. That's nice and simple. Thank you. So we have a motion made, and I will second the motion. And now you've made an amendment. I will second your amendment to the minutes, Professor Blitz. Is there any discussion on it? No discussion. All in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
No.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, now with the amended minutes, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are adopted. Thank you. Moving along the action items, we happen to have several. We have like 7. Most of them should be relatively straightforward. The first one I think is going to be of interest, and one that I think will take a little bit of discussion, although I think it's one that most of us will support. I would hope everybody does. Dealing with the refugee and asylee assistance policy for refugees and asylum folks. With that, I would ask that Alice Pritchard, would you go through that for us, please, Alice?
I would be happy to. Thank you, Regent Balducci. Can everybody hear me? I'm off site, so I'm just making sure I'm coming through. Okay, wonderful. Let me just give a tiny bit of context, but you have had the materials and I don't want to read them to you. But following a request by the Faculty Advisory Committee and Professor Blitz, and in conversation with campus leaders, President Chang asked me to work with the senior team to identify ways in which the educational supports could be provided to refugees who would like to continue or start their education at one of our 17 institutions. Rather than going it alone, I reached out to the Department of Social Services and was introduced to their resettlement agencies who, on behalf of the state, work with families to bring them in and to address their holistic needs, including their educational needs. So the resolution before you today would formalize a relationship with the Connecticut Department of Social Services and those resettlement agencies to allow us to work collaboratively to support refugees from any country that has been extended humanitarian aid by the state of Connecticut. We would establish a process through a working group representing all of the different institutions in our system to identify ways in which we could accept referrals, do reverse referrals as well, where we might have a refugee who's come directly to the institution and has not yet availed themselves of the services of a resettlement agency. So we'll convene a working group of institutions to work with these agencies to start to understand the best ways in which to work together. The resolution before you gives the campus leader flexibility. That is really what we're seeking here, is both flexibility and some consistency where appropriate to allow us to extend where available assistance to these refugees, students, and also asylees, which the resolution speaks to as well. So it can range anything from in-state tuition to those who are coming from out of the country, to tuition and fee waivers, to housing discounts, assistance with the transferring of credits or obtaining their transcripts, which could be very challenging at this particular point, employment assistance, et cetera. So the campus leaders would have flexibility to use this menu of available options to serve an incoming student or a current student. And if there was something that they identified that they'd like to be able to provide that we did not approve, they would bring a request to President Chang to ask for additional flexibility to meet that need. When I presented this to the ASA committee last Friday, they asked us to change, to add to the resolution a second resolved, which we have done for the Finance Committee's consideration, which requires us to come back to both committees with reports on how the initiative is going, so that you'll have a sense of what we have learned both by late this fall and then every fall thereafter as we move forward. The last thing I will say is we have no idea what these numbers may be like. I will tell you that IRIS, which is an organization in New Haven that serves families, has served more people by this time this year than they have ever served in a year. So volume is very high, but that does not mean that it's very high necessarily for higher ed. It could be that there are a lot of K through 12 children that need to be supported through those organizations. So we could end up with a handful of students whose names we actually know because they're so few, or we could end up with an abundance, or it could evolve over time and grow. So I think that reporting requirement that the ASA asked for is going to be really helpful for us just to keep a track of how this goes. But so I'm happy to answer questions, but just I will say the resettlement agencies were ecstatic to work with us. They have found it difficult to work with us in the past, not knowing where to enter our system and ask questions of institutions. So having this point of contact that we'll establish through the work group will also give them a long-standing relationship that they can build on as well. So that's what I would present, and again, happy to take questions. But the ASA committee did approve this with the updated resolution and encourage your support as well.
Thank you, Alice. Comments, Joanne?
Yes, Alice, kudos to
ma'am.
you and your colleagues.
Oh, thank you.
Because this is really critical for our future and potential enrollment, of course, but also to accept and encourage so many potential students to our roles, regardless of age. And I remember as a child, my mom taught English as a second language to refugees who came into this country. They ended up becoming friends. I mean, in fact, a few times we housed temporarily them in our home. To this day, I see some of those students who are now contributing so much to our society. But it's so vital to our future. And so what a great, wonderful idea. I'm very proud of you and all of us.
No, thank you, Regent Ryan. It's always a group effort, as you know.
Thank you. David, you have a comment, a question?
Well, I second Regent Ryan's comments and say that I welcome the measure that's being taken. It seems from a procedural point of view quite specific and detailed, and I think that's a good thing. And it extends it beyond the Ukrainian refugees, which we originally talked about. But here there's a mechanism to determine, in fact, whether we are dealing with a legitimate case of refugee or asylum seeker. So I certainly welcome this resolution and congratulate the folks who put it together.
Well, thank you, Professor Blitz, for raising it from the FAC to begin with. And very much to your point, wanted to make sure it was for all refugees and asylees, not just the most recent ones who obviously are in need of help.
Ira, comment?
Yeah, Ari.
Arnie, excuse me.
Ari,
What is
That's
Ira?
all right. That's
I've
all right.
got a friend named Ira I used to have anyway, yeah, Ari.
I
Sorry.
shockingly get my name reversed. I think it's a palindrome, right? Is that what they call it? So happens to me all the time. Anyway, all I have to say was really just to, I guess, third the support. I think that raising enrollment is absolutely crucial and needs to be the focus. Almost everything that we talk about, anything we can do to raise enrollment in our system is to our benefit in any way we can do it. The fact that we're also helping refugees, I think, is an added bonus. But really, anything we can do to raise enrollment, I'm a huge fan of.
Thank you, Ira.
Thank you.
Ari, any other comments? I have a couple of comments. First of all, I know there's a bit of a difference, Alice, between refugee and asylum seekers. And how does that differ here?
So again, I've been...
The process that they go through, there's a little different process, isn't there?
Exactly. So I have been schooled on this a bit, and I would still say I am far from expert, but I did add a paragraph in the staff report about this, that asylees are individuals who come to the country on their own. And so there are individuals who have fled the Ukraine, fled Afghanistan, fled other places prior to large movements of refugees from countries. And so some of them will come to the state on their own, and it's quite possible that they have already reached our campuses. And I immediately heard from a faculty member at Western who's advocating on behalf of a student who I do not believe is working with a resettlement agency. And so we really wanted to make sure that those who have found their way on their own are also not only established, with us and get supports from us, but really do get referred back to those resettlement agencies because they have legal issues, they have housing issues, they have other things that, they may have families that they need to house, not just a student. So really important that we also help the refugee resettlement agencies to serve those individuals. So we'll be making a reverse referral in many cases back to the agency.
Okay, thank you. Now you mentioned that we don't know how many this could be. And as I recall reading the numbers, they were small, then they got bigger, and then they got like, God knows where they go, so that's somewhat of interest to me. I think it's very laudable. I think this is great. I think it's a good idea. How many other states are doing this? Do we have any idea, other states that might be involved with this type of program?
There are other states. The National Association of System Heads had a call a couple of months ago to talk about some of the other state and university efforts that are going on. So I think there are multiple states doing this. I will say that there are other states who are doing far more than we are doing in terms of their institutions. There are institutions who are actually sponsoring refugees that are helping to bring people to the States. So I feel like we're putting our toes in the water. This seems like a good approach for our system. But we may find that we want to evolve our practices as we go forward. But yes, certainly there's a lot of support for this across the country, and a lot of universities and colleges are engaging to support students, both for their own reasons and to support the refugees as well.
Thank you. And I notice it's within available resources, so to speak.
Correct.
And with all due respect to this whole idea, I just am a firm believer that we take care of our homegrown first, making sure that those men and women that are seeking get their fair piece of the pie here. I have no disrespect or anything. I think it's a great idea, but I want to be certain that those that are here now are also taken care of in the process. And I guess David and his group came up with the thought that we have another look at it each fall. In the resolution, it indicates that, and I come before our committee, and I think that's a good idea, so we do have a better feel for it. But other than that, I think it's a move in the right direction. It shows that we are sensitive to what's going on and to those men and women out there that are looking and seeking help, and I certainly would support it. Any other comments by other members? Hearing none, All those in, I would ask for a motion,
So moved.
thank you. A second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution's adopted. Moving
Thank
on
you all.
to the I'm sorry?
I just said thank you all very much.
Oh. The next item we have before us deals with nursing home program and
Not nursing home, nursing fees.
nursing fees. Is Kelly here? Carrie Kelly. This is not a good day for me, by the way, Carrie. But I know you understand also, just as Ari does. Please, would you go through this for us? I think it's of interest, and explain why we're doing this increase in fees.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to defer to my colleague, Maya LaPierre-Drager, who is the provost for CT State, who can walk you through this item.
Hello, good morning, everyone. How are you?
Good morning.
Also with me, just to clarify, is Constance Hotchkiss. She's the director of the Division Director of Nursing, Allied Health, and Vet Tech programs at Northwestern Community College. She's a representative from the Connecticut Nursing Directors Council, so she's here to answer questions as well. But in brief, what this is we have annual fees for our nursing programs across our 6 colleges. And we did not realize until just a few months ago that these fees would need to increase, in part as a pivot out of COVID and going into more online instruction and virtual instruction with clinicals. There are increased fees that have been assessed to us in terms of the resources that we've traditionally used for these programs. So there are 3 different fees I'd like to break down briefly. There's the CT-CCNP Student Assessment ATI fee. That's the Assessment Technologies Institute. These fees, what you see, the 82 per semester is for the first 3 semesters traditionally. And in the 4th semester, there's an additional $180 fee. That's the capstone, if you will, for the seniors. So those fees collectively need to increase across the board. So it's $136.25 for the first 3 semesters, and the 4th semester is increased to the $316.25, again, with that senior assessment that needs to take place. And again, the primary reason for those fees are assessments related to virtual clinicals and other resources that the students traditionally use. The second fee is a nursing media fee. This fee we're doing away with. Traditionally, we had a contract with Follett and Pearson where students would pay for a fee each semester, and it was prorated where they would get all their materials for the 2 years in advance, and they'd pay sort of a bundled fee broken out over 4 semesters. That contract has ended, and we are not using that any longer, so that fee is being removed, and materials will be purchased through the college bookstores according to what those programs are going to use locally. And then the third one is an exam soft testing fee. That is a $26.75 fee related to taking exams in a digital format via online learning and other things. This is a result of the COVID. Not every campus may use that, so only the campuses that will be using the software will be assessing that fee. So that's the overview, and if you have any questions, myself and Connie are here to help.
Thank you. Just quickly, the second part, the fall 22-23. So we're going to collect that. It looks like we're doing away with it in 23, but we're going to collect it the first half. Is that correct?
So these are fees that are assessed each semester. So the $136.25, that's assessed at the first, second, and third semester of a nursing student. In their 4th semester, the final spring, they would pay the $316.25.
No, I'm talking about the media fee, Maya.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. The media fee used to be $247.75 each semester. And so that's being completely removed altogether because we no longer will have that contract with Pearson and Follett.
Okay, but we're going to collect it this fall. Is that correct?
So So what's going to happen is, what happens is the students who are already finished their first year and they've gone into the second, those fees still need to be collected from those senior students because they already have the materials, but we're going to assess them at the course level rather than a program fee. So only on the 2 senior courses that they enroll in will this fee appear. The freshmen will not have it. That's because those senior students have already obtained the materials in advance and they're just simply paying it out over the remaining semesters.
Okay, and that's why it reads that way in the resolution 24775/0.
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, any other comments by members of the committee? Yes, Joanne?
I believe you're muted.
Okay, sorry. How do these rates compare with other institutions that offer nursing programs?
So again, these are the fees for all of our institutions in Connecticut that offer the nursing programs, and I can defer to Connie Hotchkiss if she can speak to programs outside of the state.
Yeah, these are pretty consistent with what nursing programs,
Okay.
Assess for their students, and some nursing programs, their fees are considerably higher, actually.
Okay, thank you. And then this comment is about Connie Hotchkiss, short of embarrassing her. I remember when this program began at Northwestern, it was long before I was on the Board of Regents. She came to me to talk to me about this phenomenal program that she was suggesting for Northwestern. And of course, I jumped on it because I knew the need in healthcare was growing by leaps and bounds. So kudos to Connie, who started this program. Gee, Connie, how many years ago was that? And
It was 12 years ago, Joanne.
okay. And I remember she was so proud. There were already 10 enrollees. If I'm not mistaken, I think 8 of them, they all graduated. I think 8 of them immediately found jobs in the nursing field.
We
So,
actually graduated 19.
I'm way off in my numbers.
And our first year, I was very proud because our first year we had 100% pass rate on our licensing exam. So that was really,
And Connie, I'll never forget this. I was a nervous wreck. I spoke at that ceremony when they all received whatever they received. And I was just so proud of what all of them were doing, but of you and your foresight and your creating this phenomenal program. So
thank you, Joanne. And I did not do this by myself. It was a team effort, and
I know.
A lot of support. So thank you.
You're welcome.
One other comment. This is for the community colleges. Now, we also have nursing programs at our universities, as you know. Just the discrepancy or the difference between the two programs, the ones at the universities and the ones and the programs at the community colleges. Do they pay these same fees? I'm not familiar with what they do at, for instance, Southern or Central, et cetera.
I can't speak specifically to what their fees are, but there most definitely are also fees associated with their programs. But I would have to look at that. I don't know what their actual fees are.
But this has no effect, according to this, to the university, strictly the community colleges.
Correct.
Where we desperately need nurses. Seems like we need nurses and lifeguards now, I heard this morning, so we are really in dire straits. Any other comments by members of the committee? If not, I'll try your minds. All those in favor of the resolution, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
The third item on the agenda deals with our drop payment program. Melinda, are you the one that's going to be discussing this issue?
I can, yes.
Yes. Well, why don't you go right ahead and discuss it?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I'm not on camera. The storm last night seems to have made the internet a bit unstable. So this proposed revised policy is to address inconsistencies in the practice of dropping students for non-payment across the system. The goal of the policy includes establishing more specific criteria for when the drop happens, managing student accounts receivable better by preventing that uncollectible debt, and protecting students from financial obligations that they are unable to repay. Policy removes the requirement of fees to be paid at the time of registration as well, and it establishes a small balance threshold for the drop policy. So with the new proposed policy, the drops will start the week after the account balance due date and will continue each week through the add drop period. The threshold is to be set at $500. So if a student's remaining balance as of that date is $500 or below, they will not be dropped, so they can continue and to ensure that they can secure a schedule, the student must have, aside from that $500, they should have paid in full, enrolled in a payment plan, financial aid or loan awards, or is being verified for that. They have pending contract or third-party arrangements, or have a memo on file for any outside scholarships or other extenuating circumstances. That information will be on file. Exceptions to the policy can be made by the registrar. Those exceptions will be granted for up to 2 weeks. And after that 2 weeks, any further exceptions to the policy must be granted by the Associate Vice President of Enrollment and Retention Services. So we recommend the policy to clarify.
Linda, you're cutting out. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you repeat that, please?
We're recommending, please.
So we are recommending the policy to clarify and establish that drop criteria, since there is no current criteria across the system, and it will create consistency across the campuses.
Can I just add a comment or two? First of all, I'd like to thank Melinda and Madeline Santiago and the enrollment management staff, who we have very good collaboration at the CT state level between the finance and accounts receivable staff and the enrollment management staff, and this is the product of that collaboration. I firmly believe that it is in our interest, the interest of the one college, to have uniform financial practices so that students can know what to expect and have clear guidelines for, their requirements to pay, and the ability to, the drops and registration requirements are consistent across the campus in order to make the student experience better and to assist students being successful. In addition, however, we have enormous challenges bringing the 12 colleges together from a business office perspective, and by having uniform policies and timeframes for items like this, it allows us to manage the IT process for executing drops and managing our accounts receivable as a single entity, which would not be possible if we're trying to implement 12 separate schedules and policies across the campuses. So this really does allow us to advance some of our streamlining of business office practices within the CT state. So thanks again to the staff who put this together.
And it also saves money, therefore, in the long run for us, I would think.
That certainly is my hope.
The only question I have, you clarified it quite nicely, Melinda, was the fact that we're giving the discretion up to the registrar, but I see that's only for a period of 2 weeks, one, and after that it would go to the vice president of enrollment, which makes sense if it's going to go further. So I think that that's relatively good, as you and your staff have done good work. Ben has made some additional comments, which I'm grateful for. So any other comments then on this resolution by members? If not, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution's adopted. Thank you. The fourth item that we have before us deals with the transportation fee, which we implemented a while back. And I think, Ben, you're going to just go over that for us?
Yes, I'm happy to do it very quickly. This is a quick item. As you know, we charge a UPass fee of $40 per semester that allows students to take the bus or the train at no cost as part of their enrollment at CSU institutions. As you may have read, one of the uses of the federal fiscal stimulus that was provided to the state of Connecticut was to provide free bus service for a number of months during the pandemic. We pointed out to the Department of Transportation that that they were charging us a UPass fee for our students to take the bus, but the bus service has been made free for a period of time by the use of federal funds. And in response, the Department of Transportation has offered to lower the UPass fee for the fall semester to compensate our students for the free bus service that has been provided by the federal government. And so they have reduced that fee to $16 for the fall semester. And this resolution allows us to pass that reduced fee along and those savings along to our students this coming fall.
Thank you, Ben. Any other comments? It's a nice one, another plus for our students that have to do have transportation issues, especially at the price of gasoline today. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution?
I'm not sure you have a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get a motion on that resolution. Is there one? Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted. The fifth item we have before us deals with the reallocation of funds at Southern and Western. And Keith, Keith, is that you're going to do? Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, Keith Epstein normally would have been presenting this, but he has another important meeting at which he's representing us, actually on a matter related to another item on the agenda. He's appearing before the State Properties Review Board today. This resolution will allow us to reallocate unused project funding from two projects funded under the CSCU 2020 program. As you may recall, when we complete a project in this program, any unspent funds or any surplus funds that are not necessary to conclude the project may be reallocated to the infrastructure, code compliance and infrastructure project at the appropriate campus. In this case, there is, and I would point out there was I'm going to make some corrections we will correct the fiscal years that were incorrectly listed in the resolution. So for fiscal years 16, 19, and 20, there is a $2 million, estimated $2 million return from Southern's Health and Human Services building, which is just now recently completed, which will be made available to Southern's infrastructure and code compliance project. And then at Western, fiscal 16 funding for Higgins Hall, which is now completed in the amount of $935,272, will be reallocated under this resolution to Western's infrastructure code compliance project. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions or comments? Is there a motion to adopt the resolution? Thank you, Ari. Is there a second? Thank you, Felice. All those, any other comments or questions on this? It's something we've done before many times, and I think it's a proper thing to do, and it's nice when we can save some money and move it along to another project. No other comments? All those in favor of adoption of the resolution by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That resolution is adopted. The last, the next item deals with ACES and the
North Haven.
North Haven. We've done this before several years ago, trying to reach out and make this finally end for us and save us some dollars. Ben, do you want to go through that again then?
Yes, this item has been before us in different forms in the past, but this is, we're asking for, well, the background is we currently lease about 2/3 of the property at the North Haven campus to ACES, and so it's, we're essentially switching positions, and we are giving them the property, and they are, and we will pay our prorated share of the expenses to support the property rather than the other way around, which it had been. ACES intends to use this property to I mean, they operate a school there, which they intend to improve and expand once this transaction has concluded. This is what we're asking for is approval of a conveyance agreement with ACES that lays out the terms on which we will convey the property to them, and also authorizes us to request the State Property Review Board to approve that conveyance, which is a procedure required under state statute. The conveyance agreement, we believe, meets all of our needs. It includes detailed provisions regarding the maintenance of the property. It requires ACES to set aside funds for capital improvements that may be required to the portion of the facility that we're continuing to use, and provides us with an unlimited right to use the portion of the facility we're currently using for our automotive repair program. As you know, we are actively seeking alternative locations for that automotive repair program, but this agreement gives us as much time as is necessary to continue to operate the program in North Haven while we look for new homes.
Before we vote, is there a motion for adoption of the resolution?
So moved.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you. Second by Ari. Discussion. Any further discussion on this? It's something, as Ben said, we've been over this in different forms over the last 5 or 6 years, and this just more or less takes it out of our hair, so to speak. It's another money saver, which is always of interest, but it also simplifies the process for us. So all those in favor of adoption of the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Resolution's adopted. Thank you all very much. The last item we have before us is quite important, as you can see. It deals with our funding for 2023, which Ben will be going into for our spending plan. Ben, would you
Sure.
go right into that, if you would?
I'd be happy to. I'm going to turn it over quickly for a few slides from Melantina that go through some of the highlights of the spending plan, so that you can have the benefit of that, and then I'm happy to take any conversation and participate in any discussion thereafter.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Ben. And obviously, the best is for last, how they say. The proposed budget reflects the allocation of funds according to the values of the mission and priorities at our institutions. This budget includes about $1.5 billion in expenditures. The colleges and universities spending plans are detailed on attachment A to G of the agenda package. To begin with, I would like to mention the complex process that takes place behind the financial information and documents presented for your approval today, which involves many departments' input on campuses. First, I would like to acknowledge the effort of all leaders and finance professionals at our institutions. They are the experts in putting together the puzzle by projecting revenue and expenditures to balance the budget by following guidance and assumptions provided to achieve consistency and comparable data across the system, which is very important to compare apple to apple. I also would like to acknowledge my team members, Lakita and Michelle, for their hard work and continued support. They are the working bees, and they need to be acknowledged publicly. While this proposed budget is relatively financially secure, we are still faced with some serious decisions about recurring increases in personnel costs and inflationary pressures. The key factors listed on this slide that are influencing the proposed budget are the tuition revenue, as projected, reflects the decline in enrollment with the applied increase in rates that were approved by the board. one-time state funding, which represents a significant increment compared to prior years. Large number of retirements experienced in the current year and the past 2 years, increased payroll and fringe benefits costs, and the most outlier is the 27 payroll that occurs every 11 years for biweekly payrolls like state payroll. Overall, institutions remain focused on expense containment, providing longer-term challenges related to declining enrollment and increased costs. The following slides is an overview and perspective. We will go over each key factor that interacts with each other in relations to costs and revenue sources. Next. The university's proposed budget is built on assumptions of a combined 2.3% decline in enrollment, FTE enrollment, from current year. There are some variations among universities for assuming flat enrollment at Central and 5% decline at Southern. On the other hand, the community colleges put forward a more optimistic enrollment projection of 6.1% increase in FTE over current year. This assumption is assuming a recovering from pandemic and will bring the colleges at the same level as FY21. So the reality is, we know that declining enrollment was happening before the pandemic, but the pandemic worsened the trend. Connecticut is not unique. According to the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center, enrollment declines continue to worsen this spring at colleges across the nation. It was reported a 4.1% decline at both undergrad and graduate levels. Next. This represents an overview of how the state money are allocated. The state support can be looked at as two categories: continuing block grants and one-time funding. On this slide, the allotment description for one-time funding is marked with an asterisk for easy identification. The system total approved state support represents 61% of total revenue, double the amount when compared to pre-pandemic FY18, FY19 level. One-time funding allocated for RSA adjustment for pay increases and for support of the 27 payroll was specifically allocated to each unit by OPM as a percent of their block grant, at each institution's block grant. All other additional one-time funding were distributed to institutions based on the most current 3 years rolling average FTEs. To provide flexibility during the transition year, colleges' state support is reflected at the consolidated Connecticut state level. What's important to note is the state support incremental for current FY22 and next fiscal year FY23. It's about $300 million. The takeaway is without the additional state funding, institution would have experienced drastic deficits. Next. The available funding sources that cover the projected expenditures are from tuition and fees, state support, and all other sources that are rolled into one bucket, presented as a percent of total revenue. For example, at universities, tuition and fees represent 38% of total revenue, state support 52% of represents state support, And all other revenue, which includes the room and board and all other sources, net of contra revenue, it's about 10%. At the colleges, 26% of total revenue, it comes from tuition and fees, 73% comes from state support, and 2 million for all other combined. At Charter Oak, it's 53% comes from tuition and fee and 45% state appropriation, and an additional 2% from all other revenue. System-wide, total projected tuition and fees revenue adjusted for approved increase in rates and enrollment assumptions represent $41 million less, or 8% lower than FY19 pre-pandemic level. Also noticeable, the value of all other revenue is at 50% less than pre-pandemic. This is due to reduced activities, lower interest income, lower program income, less athletic revenue. Most of the decline is represented by campus activities that are expected to recover slowly as training offered to the public, space rentals takes place, athletic revenue, which usually fluctuates with gains guarantees. Please note that this proposed budget does not include any revenue from CARES Act funding or HERF allocated to institutions during the pandemic. Although HERF available balance of over $80 million is being counted for to supplement the lost revenue in the current fiscal year. Next. Following the revenue, we will go over the expenditures. The projected expenditures reflect the budget requests received from colleges and universities. There was a general expectation of achieving savings from efficiencies and expenditures reductions. Those are reflected on this budget proposal. The new incremental spending is slightly under $156 million, or close to 12% over FY22 estimate, and represents obviously the personnel cost increases, which reflects the collective bargaining pay increases of 2.5% plus the step plus the bonus. This increase in cost also reflects some of the delayed processing of the retro payments that will fall from 22 into 23 budget. The cost of fringe benefits is expected to increase. Comparing the new rates to current rates, medical insurance alone is going up by an average of over 12%. Due to inflationary pressures, all other expenses are continuing to go up, such as IT, equipment, contracts, professional services. Steeper increase in all other expenses represent food service contracts, which are estimated to go up by 17%. Facilities, lease, rental, security, and maintenance contracts are expected to go up. Utilities are, in this budget, utilities are projected to increase by 7%. And at this time, it's possible that the rates of inflation could exceed the typical CPI projected increase. So one risk in this budget that I would like to point out is the inflation. When
Valentina,
yes.
Can I just interrupt? Just a question. I'm looking at the expenses of the budget, et cetera, and we have the two pieces on top, the personnel, et cetera, but it includes all other expenses below at $178 million. Just kind of what is all, that's a big number, at least for me it is. What do all other expenses indicate or include in that $178 million, Valentina?
So all other expenses is just what I mentioned before. It's IT equipment, contracts, professional services, food service contracts, which I just mentioned will go up by 17%, are estimated to go up by 17%. There are all the security and maintenance contracts, and all the memberships system-wide. That dollar stands out, but we are looking at system-wide costs.
But why aren't they all broken out? Those are big numbers. The IT numbers, I'm sure, is very large.
Yes, that is correct. But it's if you are to, we can provide that data to you. The breakdown of all other expenses by category and by expense account. And we do have that data available, but for this presentation, I would like to keep it more condensed.
And no, that's great. That's great. But I think the members at least should have an idea, because it is a large number, where those and how they affect the budget. Okay, thank you for that.
We will provide that data immediately after the meeting. Within the expenditures, it's worth noticing the debt service payment at the universities, which reflects the approved reduction to the university fee for out-of-state students. So we collect the university fee and gets passed through towards the debt service payments. Looking at the last column on this slide, far right, the compound annual growth rate, labeled as CAGR, reflects the annualized average rate of increase over a time period. In this case, pre-pandemic to current. The compound annual growth rate is showing the mean annual increase rate in each expense category over a period of 4 years. So you can see how much it's going up by category. Next, we are reviewing the number of retirees. At the prior meeting, we were asked to present more data on retirees, including on how many have retired this year versus prior years. This data represents the number of full-time employees that have retired within each fiscal year, not calendar year. Note that there is current year, we experienced the largest number of retirees, or 14% of total full-time positions. There is a number of 152 that are still being processed because they have elected the July 1st effective date. In addition to the full-time presented on this slide, there are a total of 82 part-time employees that retired during current fiscal year, and about 25 additional in the prior 2 years. Those numbers are not included on this slide. The focus was mostly on full-time faculty versus not faculty to put things in perspective. Within this significant number of retirees, there are potential savings from delays in hiring and approved positions from retirements or resignations, as well as salary savings from refilling positions at the minimum salary level. Next.
1,200.
The estimated impact on reserves, or UMP, shows an improvement at universities, in particular with an addition to reserves at Central. But most important, colleges' UMP is projected to increase by 11.5% from ending balance of 6/30/2021. per most recent financial statements published. Charter Oak is expecting a slight decrease for user reserves. It has been stated before, the university's UMP are designated reserves about close to 70% for specific projects such as CHIFA, repayment of debt service, and funds set aside for renewal and replacement, furniture and equipment for auxiliary buildings. Next. In closing, the budget submitted for your approval brings challenges as well as opportunities to increase revenue and efficiencies. Each campus has been given the responsibility and accountability by our president to put forward a balanced budget for your consideration. President Chen communicated that each institution began to consider changes that can be implemented to address budget shortfall going forward. He reached out to all campus leaders to evaluate programs on their campuses that do not have the enrollment to justify the expenses. With this, we are open for any questions or conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Melantina. Great job, you and your team, as usual. One of the things you mentioned, and it's the one, I use the term one-shot dollars, that there aren't going to be there after this year, you know, to be used. And of course, those dollars should be used in the process of one-time purchases, whether it be a desk or a book or whatever, and not for expanding programs, etc. That's all been taken into consideration, I think, from what I can see, that you and your group have discussed, that the candy store is closed after next year. After this year, actually. Yeah, is that?
Well, okay, if I can add some comment to this. President Chang was very clear in his discussions with institutional leaders about this budget presentation, that while we had you know, the blessing of a significant amount of one-time state assistance this year to allow us to continue to operate as we address the impacts of the pandemic on our enrollment, that we don't have any expectation that that one-time funding will recur. And so he has asked each campus, as Melantina pointed out, to identify, to review programs, to review administrative processes and procedures, and to identify cost savings in all ways, but in particular by evaluating the retirements and attrition that has occurred, and to be extraordinarily careful as we refill based on our evaluation of programs, enrollment, and the needs of the institution going forward. We've been very clear that the institutions should plan to make changes now that will position them to operate in balance a year from now, even if the state does not re-up on one-time assistance that was provided. So we have a year to embark on. I mean, there were some changes reflected in this budget, but we understand that there will be further changes to the operation of these campuses in order to remain in balance in future years.
Other comments or questions by members of the committee?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I don't think the presentation that was shown was in the agenda and supporting materials, or did I miss something? Are those
no,
exact slides? Okay. Is it
No,
possible to...
we'll be provided. We'll provide it.
We'll get those, Ari.
Okay,
that's a good point.
Because going forward, I would be much more prepared to ask questions if I had those pieces of information, you know, in advance. So if we could get that, that would be really helpful.
The good news, Ari, is that we have 2 weeks instead of one, so hopefully we'll be able to get that material that Melantina has discussed, plus the piece dealing with other expenses, which I think is also important for us to take a look at, since it makes up 12% of that budget.
Agreed. And I wonder, what are we doing in the budget? Or, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about the pandemic's impact on enrollment. But continued declining enrollment's only going to put more pressure on the system. And maybe this isn't a finance committee conversation, but what are we investing in and what are we doing to increase enrollment in the system?
Well, I can speak to a couple of the major items around enrollment that we believe will help us to begin to turn enrollment around. Within the universities, we made some significant changes to the tuition structure, including reducing tuition fees for out-of-state students at the university level. And each of the campuses has made adjustments which will take several years to fully impact their ongoing enrollment patterns, but they have begun making adjustments to their recruitment and aid packaging approach in order to take advantage of those changed in tuition fees and try to drive additional enrollment from out-of-state students. So that is one area where we hope to see improvements at the university level. At the college level, we are continuing to fully fund the rollout and implementation of the Guided Pathways program, which will now be in its second year, and we believe we remain hopeful that we will see improved retention, fall-to-fall retention in the fall of 22. And so we're working through our intensive advisement program to try to improve retention, and that will obviously improve enrollment in the fall. In addition, we have, I think shortly you will begin to see over the summer a significant marketing effort around the PACT program, the free community college program, which we believe will continue to drive growing enrollment. That program has seen enrollment growth. It's been a rare bright spot in our enrollment picture. I don't know, Carrie, if you have any other items in the community college area that I'm not thinking of, but those are the two big ones that I'm aware of. You're muted.
No, thanks, Ben. I think you highlighted some of the big components of our forecast for the community colleges enrollment, but I think it's important to note that what our enrollment management team is forecasting is different than what we budgeted on. So the enrollment forecast is more optimistic. We took a more conservative approach when budgeting, and our budget assumptions bring us back to approximately the FY20 level.
So the enrollment numbers, just to make sure I'm hearing what you said, the enrollment numbers in this agenda and supporting materials packet we got are a pessimistic view, a realistic view. Like what do you think about what's our view on those enrollment numbers?
I think for the community colleges, I think we have some stretch goals, but we wanted to be conservative in our budgeting, so I think they're a very realistic goal. We hope to exceed and beat those targets, but we wanted to budget around a more conservative figure.
And if I say this correctly, Charter Oak enrollment's declining. Am I looking at that right? Anticipated to decline?
Charter Oak's enrollment is declining, and they are showing a small budget deficit. A lot of the reason that they're showing a budget deficit here is that very late in this process, about a week ago, we received final distribution of some of the one-time funds from the state of Connecticut. And our earlier estimates proved to be imperfect, as they often are. And when we saw the final distribution, not only did they redistribute it a little bit, but some decisions about the state on when some of the retroactive payments were going to be made. The combination of those two factors put Charter Oak's fiscal 23 program into a small deficit position. They also have some one-time expenses that they are incurring as a result of launching new programs to try to meet student demand. So while there is a small deficit at Charter Oak and a small drop in enrollment that they're projecting, I don't believe that either of those is indicative of a long-term trend, but in fact reflect the final distribution of state aid, as well as these new initiatives, new programs that are being developed at Charter Oak to meet current student demand.
So understanding the budget concept, I guess I'm still a little lost on, Charter Oak kind of being, our main online play or a big part of it. Seems like that'd be an area we should be able to leverage significantly in this time. So just, again, maybe this is an offline conversation, Ben, but just trying to understand how we're seeing enrollment decline there and what we're doing about that.
I would love to have that discussion at a future meeting or in a smaller group setting. I'd be happy to set that up, Art.
Okay.
David?
And Ben, I'm sorry, I got one more. I
I'm sorry.
apologize.
I'm
I know
sorry,
I'm
Art.
I'm using a lot of floor space here, floor time. Ben, we had talked about some previous meetings, setting up a sidebar to go over this fringe benefit allocation, because I still can't understand it. The relationship between salary and fringe and why it's so high and how that's all calculated. So can we get that set up? Because it just continues to stand up and get my attention every time.
And when you look at the costs up there on that big circle Melantina had up, you had personnel salaries, et cetera, and the other side is just as big, and that's the fringe benefit side. So a good point, and Ben will make Melantina do that.
Who can take that action item though? Because Pam, you're going to do it.
All over it, Ari. Got
Okay, thank you. Can we get that set up sometime in June, please?
Done.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm done.
David?
Yeah.
David?
Thanks. I'm glad that sort of Ari has asked a lot of questions, and so that sort of prepares the ground for some other questions that I have, which are specific to one institution. And that's the question of the report from Western Connecticut State University on page 46, which I don't think, they mentioned that they're going to have a freeze of 73 current vacant full-time positions, which is a considerable number for a relatively small institution. But it seems to me it doesn't indicate, for a saving of $11 million, which is the way in which they're getting themselves out of the red, at least for this year. But it seems to me that the report doesn't clearly indicate the depth of the crisis ongoing on that campus. And I'm basing myself just on news reports, which I've read, namely the vote of non-confidence in the president at Western Connecticut State University, which was held by the Western State University several weeks ago. That was reported directly related to financial considerations and the 2-day retreat which they had to look into the measures proposed by the report from the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems of Colorado, which the system office had requested. I have a couple of points that I'd like to make, or questions. One is, do we know or can we find out of those 73 positions that are not full-time positions that are not being replaced, at least in the immediate future, how many of those are in the teaching area? How many of those are in the administrative area? And secondly, could we have to members of this committee a copy of the report from the National Center for Higher Education Management Systems so that we can take a look at that as well?
Sorry.
Professor Blitz, if you have not received a copy of that report, I apologize. I thought that they had been distributed to the entire board, and I will confirm that has happened and send you a new copy to make sure that that's available to you. And I certainly can provide a breakdown of the 73 positions that are reflected as having been frozen in the Western Connecticut budget. I believe I may have seen that, and I can get that and provide that to you and to the committee.
Thank you. And I'll double check my email as well.
Joanne? Joanne, you're muted. Joanne?
Still muted.
I don't know if she's looking for unmute or doesn't realize. No, I don't think she realizes.
Joanne, you're muted.
I sent her an email or a chat. So did I. Looks like the light of recognition.
It's like the frustration of technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It happens to the best of us.
And she can put the question in the chat if she'd like.
Either that or she's left the building with Elvis.
There she is.
She,
Oh, she's
she's
getting
trying to get
technical
some
help.
IT support. There
Okay,
she go.
I'm back.
There we go.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to add that, just for your information, the executive committee of the Board of Regents and President Chang are fully on top of what is happening at Western. President Chang has his goal, one of his major goals, to work closely with them, with the president and with the faculty, and it is a major focus. So David, be assured that all your questions, I'm sure he has the information and he could give it to you. And I know, as Pam said, you'll be getting that report, but he's on top of this and we are on top of this. Okay.
That's good to hear, by the way, Joanne. It's nice to have the chairman on the finance committee. Thank you.
Not yet, David. Or not yet, Richard.
I think Ari's comments and David's, I think you made some salient points that I think we really need to get a little bit better grasp on, the fringe piece so everybody understands it totally and how it works. The fact that we've got one-shot dollars out there, how we're going to end up spending dollars in the future, and we really have to look at, nobody's mentioned this, but the dollars we have set aside in emergency cases need to be re-looked at because they're not as big as they could be. What do we have, like $100 million now at the university level as far as it takes some term I'm looking for, the
unrestricted net position, UNP.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, this budget includes growth in the UNP. I mean, we've built in small surpluses at both the colleges and the universities. It is my hope that as we manage through the year, especially given the very large amount of attrition that we've experienced, that we will be able to outperform this budget in both parts of the system, and the universities and colleges and Charter Oak, that the attrition savings and the turnover savings from those the really unprecedented rash of retirements will result in further savings, because we want to have those reserves as strong as we can going into the following year, because we do not have the guarantee of the safety net of those additional state resources. So this is an area where we are. This is a budget that very much reflects our reprieve, a one-year reprieve that we have while we begin more significant reorganization at Western to deal with their very urgent problems, but at all the remaining universities and colleges as well. The fact that Western has a more acute issue and does not have the reserves that the other member institutions have is a real challenge to them, but my conversations with the leadership of the other three universities and of Connecticut State, they are all equally concerned about the future. The reserve levels at any of our institutions are not sufficient to make up more than a year or so of a loss of state of one-time state revenue, and we clearly need to find ways in which we balance our operating and expenses and revenues going forward. This is not sustainable unless that one-time assistance is converted into recurring state help. We must find other sources of operating revenue or reductions in operating expenditures to maintain fiscal health after this year.
Ben, do we track any sort of trending on budgeted dollars spent per student and what that looks like, like whatever our budget is from, say, 2010, 2015, 2020, 2022, total dollars spent per student. Is that a ratio that's tracked somewhere?
Yes, and it has been very discouraging. I mean, if you look at that over the last 5 years, it's very discouraging because, I mean, I haven't looked at it for this budget proposal, but that's an interesting point, and I will be happy to assemble that data to reflect this, because we have fast-growing expenses, particularly related to the CBAC agreement. At the same time, we have declining enrollments. The combination of those two factors makes our spending per student appear to be rising very, very quickly right now. And the best way, I think, for us to get that under control is to have more students to support that spending. But unfortunately, in the absence of that, we must control the spending at the aggregate level in order to maintain control of that ratio.
Yeah, Ben, there's a lot. I mean, you guys are finance whizzes, and I commend you on all the detailed work you guys do. Lots of spreadsheets and details, and do a great job coalescing into charts that even somebody with limited finance background, such as myself, can follow. I would love to see an even simpler kind of a ratio there. That maybe that's something we could look at as a trending over time, and that's something we can look at as a target, go forward, because I think you've adequately and ably summarized the challenge. I mean, we cannot sustain a system that sees continually upgrading costs per student. I mean, it's going to be unsustainable. And so that might be something that would be helpful from a finance committee perspective to kind of get some clarity and simplicity on how we're doing.
Yes, that ratio was also discussed and evaluated as part of the NCHEMS report for Western, and included some information about the remainder of our system. Not only is our cost per student fast growing because of the factors I just mentioned, but we are also considerably higher than our peers in regional public systems around the country, which is concerning to us. In some respects, it's a good thing. It means we're, paying our faculty and our staff well, and that bodes well for the security of the organization. On the other hand, high fringe costs and other expenses make us very difficult to balance here in Connecticut.
And for me anyway, as Ben's mentioned, but the reserves are critical, and as we go forward, I think they're going to become more critical as to how we move, and you've made a couple of good points on that. The last year or two has been somewhat of an anomaly, with this COVID. It's been a very bad thing, but in the positive sense, if you want to call it that, the aid we got from the state and from the federal government really made us more whole, I suppose, if that's the term. Programs got diminished, et cetera, so you save dollars, and whether it's maintenance or whatever, what have you. But as we go forward, it's going to cost us more. We've got new salaries and fringe benefits we're going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to look at that, I think, in a hard way as we go forward, because as Ben mentioned before, there's no guarantee on these one-shot dollars that we're going to see any more of it. And I think things are going to get more difficult rather than easier as the years progress. And increasing student enrollment is going to be a big part of it. And I know we're going to be talking about that as we do that. So any other comments by members of the committee? I mean, we've had some. I don't know, Felice, if you had anything that you cared to indicate. You've been sitting there patiently, but I know there's things moving around in your head, and if you had those questions, we'd love to hear them.
I am so transparent. Unfortunately, I am battling COVID, and so my head feels like it's about 600 pounds, and so there's a lot of things I'm assessing, much like Ari, that I think I need to think about in order to be more lucid and specific. But yeah, part of what you're reacting to is just the acknowledgement of the massive task and the bit of whack-a-mole that's engaged with seemingly disconnected decisions that all aggregate to very significant decisions. I mean, like you, I'm a lawyer, I only can count to 10, but these are big numbers. I don't quite have the words, but I do have a lot of questions, and I won't belabor today with them. I think I need to go away, look at that deck a bit more. I saw it came through again, and then maybe reconvene.
Okay, good. Well, as I said, the good news is normally we go from Finance Committee Thursday to the following week with the board meeting. The good news, if you want to call it that, is we have a 2-week hiatus, so to speak, which will give us time for some of the breakdowns. I know Melantina and the teams worked hard, but breaking out those other things about other expenses, et cetera. A couple of concerns Ari mentioned and David, and getting those printouts that you showed, those slides, I think would be important for us to have within the 2-week period. So any other comments? David, you have a comment? I see your hand up.
Just a quick one. It's on page 48, and that's the community college expenditures, which once, you know, the 27th week and so forth has been, and CBAC and so forth has been subtracted, was an increase of 5.1 million or 1%. My understanding of the whole consolidation process was that it would result in savings at the level of the community colleges. So I'm just wondering if that 1%, which is not a large amount, is just an anomaly, or is that expected to increase or decrease, or can we at some future point have more information on that?
Carrie, you're muted.
Yeah, I would defer to Carrie on that. Do you have any thoughts on that question, Carrie?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond, Professor Blitz. The long-term trajectory is that the implementation of the consolidation will achieve savings, but FY23 is a bit of an outlier. As Melantina explained before, we have a once every 11 years occurrence, which is the 27th payroll. So as you know, there's 26.1 payrolls per year, and that aggregates up, and this is the year that we have more. So additionally, I would observe there are some one-time transitional costs where we're running in parallel for the implementation of Connecticut State while we run out the 12 legacy institutions before consolidation. So those two factors in combination cause the FY23 budget to be higher. We anticipate in the out years that it will reduce costs while increasing revenues to achieve fiscal solvency.
Thanks, Carrie. David, any other comments on that?
No,
any other comments?
That's something that I'd like to just follow up on, because, you know, there's a considerable amount. I mean, every week I get the emails of the new positions or various positions that are being posted, and by my calculation, there must be well over 500 of them. Now, I realize that in many cases, these are people transferring from one position to another, but it seems to me that there is a considerable increase in the size of the administrative bureaucracy of the one college. And I'm concerned that that's going to be a factor in increased expenditures rather than decreased.
If I could respond to Professor Blitz's observation, indeed, you're seeing an extraordinary and historic level of turnover that's been precipitated by the CBAC retirement disincentive. So many of those things that you're seeing are refills. However, this budget does include some new positions for FY23 at the community colleges. There's 64 new positions. 38 of which are at Connecticut State Community College. And I'll give you a flavor for what some of those new positions are. We're going to be hiring a chief of police and director of public safety, a director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to be having 6 academic deans, 18 associate deans, IT tech, and a veterans chief certifying official. So that gives you an idea of what we're hiring. Some of these positions are new. We've never had a chief of police, director of public safety, and we certainly know that's something that's a priority. But others, like the 6 academic deans and the 18 associate deans and 2 assistant deans, will be running in parallel as we currently have an academic structure. We need to stand up the one for FY24. So during FY23, we'll be hiring that staff and we'll be running in parallel. So that's part of the reason why we have increased costs during the transitional period. But the high volume of postings that you're seeing are primarily refills.
Yeah, and I would just add, Professor Blitz, I asked my assistant to pull up the retirement spreadsheet from the presentation this morning. If you look, the retirements are significantly concentrated in non-faculty and staff positions for reasons we could all muse about. But as you can see, the rate of retirements at 16% of our full-time positions in non-faculty positions across the system have retired during this fiscal year that's about to end or will retire this month. That is a rate more than 3 times higher than the retirement rate for faculty, which has ticked up somewhat as we've gotten close to the cutoff in June of this year, or now. But the retirement rate for staff positions is very high. And I think that to some degree, that is driving a lot of the recruitment efforts for staff positions that you correctly have identified in the, in the job listings that come out every week from CSCU.
That's double.
Huge.
Any other comments then by members of the committee? Well, I think, Pam, did you want to indicate something, or I'm sorry?
I just wanted to let the committee know that Melantina's slide deck has been sent to everyone. You should have that, and it will be included in the minutes of this meeting as well.
Thank you, Pam, for that. I think we'll have some good questions and dialogue during the full board meeting. Hopefully you members will be participating in that. But right now I have to move this so that we can take it up before the board. I don't remember now, it's been a while, if we had a motion to adopt a resolution on the spending plan, but if we didn't, I would ask for a motion for such. Thank you. And a second, thank you, Ari. Motion made, seconded. Any other further discussion on adoption of the resolution on the spending plan? We'll bring before the full board in 2 weeks. If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Resolution's adopted. Thank you very much. Any other comments before we adjourn the committee by any members? Hearing none, then I would make a motion for adjournment of the committee.
I just, hold on, before hold on, I apologize. I did have just one more comment. I maybe didn't say it before, but to just, Ben, Valentina, the whole finance team, I'm sure a ton of work, I know a ton of work goes into this.
Absolutely.
And I really just wanted to say, thank you to all you for putting that work in. It's a critical part of the system. And our mission is to make sure we have a budget that supports our mission. And so just wanted to acknowledge the great work from the team. Melantina, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ari.
Further comments? We all agree on that. I think they're well said. Further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Excuse me. Madam Chair.
Joanne, you're on mute again. Still on mute, Joanne.
Joanne, you're on mute.
Still on mute. Reading body language, I think she's saying move on, but yes, move on.
Okay,
thank you.
Now for the last time, I hope, all those in favor of adoption of the resolution, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution is adopted. And any other further questions, comments by members of the committee before adjournment? I think we already made that, seconded it. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Have a good day, everybody, a good weekend, and look forward to further discussion. Felicia, I hope you feel better.
Yes,
please feel better.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Live stream is stopped.